I'm super excited to be talking with y'all today. As we go to get started here, I just want to invite both of you to give us a little bit, we listened to your amazing bios, but give us a little bit of an introduction into what how you use your personal brand and why this chat, why y'all are such excellent experts to have talk on this subject.
All right, I guess I'll start. Personal brand is everything. Just like companies have personal brands or brands, and we all, as consumers, know that we gravitate towards certain brands, right? Because of their reputation, because of the value they bring, because we trust them. And our personal brand is very much like that. And, I go way, way, way back. And I used to say the most important tool you could have was your Rolodex at the time. Some of you may not even remember that term. And it's about the relationships you have and building those relationships over time so that you are a trusted, valued person that they know they can count on. And that's really what your personal brand represents.
Absolutely. Thank you, Rita, for that. And thank you so much for that introduction, Meg. So when I think about personal brand and how it has played out in my work and in my career, so, just like organizations who have these brands that are around their values and their strengths and their superpowers, those things that differentiate them. And one of the things I found for myself is when I delved into that for myself, understanding what my strengths were, what are my imperfections, what are the things that really differentiate me, those are the levers I have been able to pull and continue to pull to drive my career forward and to propel myself forward. So just as a little example, one thing I didn't mention in my bio, so I was a professional theater actor, an equity actor for a small part of my career out of college. And I don't lead with that information because, being an actor in and of itself has a brand, and I work with very significant organizations and top leadership. So I don't lead with that information. But what I know is the fact that I have that in my background is an asset, because I can coach leaders on not only their brands, but their presence, right? How they show up, how they communicate, how they deal with communication snafus, how to be grounded, how to project confidence and credibility. So all that comes from my own personal experience. And so I would just say to anyone listening, is you really want to find out what is your differentiator, what's your superpower, and push that lever, because that's the thing that's going to propel you forward. And that's been my experience. And I'm sure Rita has felt the same way. So.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Go ahead, Meg.
So thank you both for sharing that. And I think it's really important, Rasheryl, obviously what you'd said about that presence, right? Because it can be, kind of a hard concept to present to people, because you're used to maybe relying on your work to speak for you, or, as opposed to something like your personality or your presence. If we're talking about it in terms of like each of our own personal brand, how can we get comfortable marketing ourselves as a brand? I mean, like personally, I do this for a living. I interview people, I get to talk to people, and it's great. But also, like, I have a really hard time kind of separating that out from maybe like PowerToFly and the mission that they have. So how would you, suggest that people kind of approach this for themselves?
Yeah. So would you like for me to start, Rasheryl? Okay. So I think that, first of all, authenticity has been really important for me. I think too often we try to compare ourselves to others or take the persona of other people that we maybe admire or maybe we think we have to be successful. And I think being your authentic self is the best thing in the long run for you. And sometimes our authentic self doesn't necessarily match with where we'd like to be or think we should be. And so we spend a lot of time pushing the rock uphill, okay? Going, I gotta be this or do this or look this way or act this way in order to be successful. And maybe a consideration is to, first of all, vet out the organizations that match your persona versus the other way around. Right now, I think it's important that when you're interviewing with an organization, you're interviewing them as well as them interviewing you. And there needs to be a match. And the closer you can get to matching yourself to an organization or to a role, it may be your own company, it may be a project, it could be lots of things where you interact with others, then the more chance you're going to have of being successful in that role long term. Otherwise, you're going to always feel like, am I good enough? Am I a fit? Do I need to change? And I've coached lots of executive women, especially Black women who, well, can I wear my hair this way, or can I dress a certain way, and do I have to talk, and having been the only, as I'm sure Rasheryl has many oftentimes, we've lived through that of, to fit in, we have to do certain things. And I think what I've learned over time is just be your authentic self. And that's really the best fit of all.
Absolutely. So, I totally agree with Rita that authenticity is the basis for everything, right? So being authentic. And I want to play devil's advocate just a little bit here, because yes, you must be your authentic self. And I think that you also have to be appropriate, right? To the context, to the situation. So, sometimes I've coached people or individuals who will say, well, I want to, why can't I do this? Or why can't, this is my authentic self. And really what it is that's your comfort zone. That's the way you're used to doing certain things. That's the way you're used to showing up. And you being in your comfort zone is not being authentic. That's self-indulgent, right? So you have to have a distinction between authenticity and, is this authentic or is it just comfortable? Because part of being a leader, part of, PowerToFly, this is all about elevating, right? Getting to the next level. Part of that means you have to go outside of your comfort zone. You have to be able to fit into the context. It doesn't mean that your individuality goes away. It doesn't mean your authenticity goes away. But just like, for all of us, we exist in different places. Who I am as a daughter, as a friend, as a mother, as all these different things. I'm not inauthentic when I'm being a daughter versus when I'm working with a client. I'm being appropriate to what that is, right? So that's just one thing I want people to keep in mind is you want to be authentic, and in order for you to propel your career, you have to be appropriate to the context, and that's called leadership. It's not called selling out. It's not called not being able to bring your culture to work. It's just called you got to propel. You got to be at the table to make changes. So you have to balance. It's a balancing act of those things, and what feels like you're still maintaining your authenticity and also having a brand that is marketable, is able to be propelled through an organization. And I think it takes sometimes you have to step back and really, from a coaching perspective, you have to really unpack, okay, is this really about inauthenticity, or what is this really about? So I just wanted to add that.
No, I really appreciate that. And I think you're right on. I often tell people they have to be multilingual, multicultural. So it's not about, as you said, losing yourself. It's about you have to adjust the language that you're speaking and the way that to be successful, especially if you want to elevate to a point where you can then help change happen.
Yes.
Because so often it's like, well, if this culture would be so much better if, well, you can't come in and buck the system, because it's very much like you join this group and they have a certain uniform and they have a certain way and they have a certain culture, and you opted into that. And so to come in and think that just because you're not going to be able to, they're going to have to adapt to you, is unrealistic. You're absolutely right as a leader, but elevate yourself to a point where you can then cause change to happen if it needs to happen in that culture. And
Yes.
that's what, again, leadership is about.
I love this. And you're so right. We had, our earlier chat today with Sienna. They were talking about how, there's a lot of code switching that people kind of get pressured into. And it's not really about that. It's more about bringing your full self to work, yeah, but also, you don't act the same way as a leader as you would, maybe with your kids or, with friends on the weekend.
Right.
And so it's more about, knowing who you are as part of your identity, but then you're right, like kind of shifting between those personas to highlight what is going to be most beneficial to you in that moment. It's so wonderful. So thank you both for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
We have a lot of questions coming in the chat, so I want to try and get to a couple of those. Winona Price is asking, would you consider this more of a language or communication skill?
Would I consider being authentic, you mean?
She's not specific, but yeah, I would say, like, would you consider this authenticity and the presentation of it more about your language or your communication skills, or is it maybe kind of a combination of all of these?
Yes, I think it's really your presence, your presence, right? Your leadership presence, executive presence, personal presence. So, here's the thing, and this may not be popular, but if you want to be at the table making change, you got to get to the table, right? You have to get to the table. So, what we know is that, the world is unfair. The table is not set the same for everybody. We know this, these are givens, right? So, but the thing is, if your goal is, I want to get to the table so I can affect change, I can, do what is in my purpose and my passion to do, then, then you do need some ability to get there in ways that, meaning you don't want to create a lot of resistance. There's already going to be resistance, but you don't want to create even more resistance to your ability to get there, right? And so part of that presence and that professionalism is, yes, you need to, if you need to work on your grammar and your language and your polish, yes. If it means using less slang in the office, yes. If it means, really speaking the King's English, then that's, then that's just part, as I see it, that is what's called for because you're a leader, right? Now, when you get to the table, or when it's your table, then maybe you have more leeway in terms of how you're going to show up. And again, I loved what you said about being multilingual. It's like, you're not inauthentic if at home, if you're multilingual, you're not inauthentic if you're speaking Italian or if you're speaking Spanish. You're just speaking a different language because that's who you're with.
Right.
And that doesn't make you inauthentic because you can speak Italian or you can speak Spanish, or you can speak Russian, or you speak however you speak, right? So, but I do think right now the door is open. We need more women of color who are powerful and able to make change. And if it means polish your language and your presence so you can get through, do that.
Right. Yeah.
I think that's a great point. And so often, granted, it depends on, your background, and there's a lot of different things that change from person to person. But if you are in a privileged or resourced capacity to be able to, weather these storms and make that charge and fight your way to the table, personally, I feel like each of us, no matter what we're struggling with, we each have a duty to do that, because there will be people behind us and people that come after us that can't make those sacrifices, that can't push through that can't, sit and grit our teeth until we get to that point at the table where we can affect that change. And so if you're able to do that, absolutely do it. Please do it. If not for yourself, for everybody that comes after you.
Exactly.
Whether you're coming at this from the perspective of, a woman of color or an immigrant or, some other group that is seen as having to, pull themselves up and rise through the ranks because they're not already well represented, absolutely try and do that if you can. If you can't, that is, no pressure on you, but if you can, please do that for other people. Yeah. We're having some really great questions here. Oh, sorry, go right ahead.
We're fortunate enough to be in a position where we can be the example. There's a lot of sometimes pressure that comes with that, because you feel like you're kind of carrying the weight of the race or the women on your shoulders. And so it is about, not only considering yourself, but considering others. And I just like to say, maybe generally speaking about brand, because there are probably some people here who are thinking, well, why, if I'm working for a company, why is my personal brand important? Now, obviously, if you're a solopreneur, an entrepreneur, and you're working for yourself, your brand is very important because it reflects what you represent in terms of the services you offer or your company. But it's equally important, I think, to have that personal brand, even in an organization, because it could determine, if you're promoted or if you are considered for other opportunities. And I think we all should be mindful of the brand that we carry because it is the person and it follows you. Everything we put on social media, everything we do when we're out networking, all of that matters. And so again, it's not to say, my God, I've got to just be walking around, with fear of, what people are going to think about me. It's more about, what do you think about yourself? What's
Yes.
important to you? What do you want to represent in terms of how you carry yourself? And some people really are at a loss because they've never stopped to reflect and think about, well, what is my brand? And they struggle with this. And that's why they go through these identity crises sometimes, because they're trying to figure out, who am I and what do I really represent? And what is it that I want to stand for? And you can go way back. I mean, you could probably as early as childhood and start looking at the patterns in your life and what was important to you and where you really stood out. You can talk to other people because they give you honest feedback, those people who love and trust you, and ask, what they think. And from that, really sit with it and go, okay, so based on this, maybe this is who I want, who I am and who I'd like to portray. So I think it's just really important to take this very serious because it follows you. And especially in this social media era, everything you say and do, and people form perceptions about you, about your company, about your services and what you do based on what they see. So.
Yes.
Yeah, I love that idea. And I love how you're talking about it as taking a look back at the patterns in your life and look and see what's really important to you, because that's how you bring that authenticity. But I've done a lot of these. And one of the really awesome things that stuck with me with the past chat was that your brand is what you want other people to say about you when you're not in the room. And so it's what you're projecting, and it can be, you can absolutely start from an authentic place, start from, your roots, what's important to you, what's, what your values are. But then, yeah, if there's something that you want people to say about you that they're not currently saying, okay, then what changes do you need to make that happen? I absolutely love this. So we had a lot of questions coming in the chat about people wanting to know how to tell what their superpower is. And we also wanted to talk about how you can determine your own USP or unique selling point. So let's talk a little bit about that and how you would find that for yourself.
Can I share a quick little exercise that I do in my I have a personal branding process I use with my clients. So one of the things when I look at superpowers, just a really quick hit to get it, is I want everybody who's listening in the audience and you guys here to think back to your childhood, to something you were criticized for, right? So something that you did and you were sort of criticized by parents, by siblings, by grandparents, whoever, like they would say, oh, so-and-so, she's blah, 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 or she's so whatever, right? So for me, one of the things was, I don't know if you can tell, but bossy, right? So I would hear, like my cousins especially, Rasheryl's so bossy, right? And so I want you to think about for yourself, like what is a criticism you used to get in childhood, right? So when I think about bossy as one of mine, now, when I fast forward to adulthood and to being an entrepreneur and a coach and all the things I do, actually, I get paid a lot to be bossy, right? Like, because as a coach, my clients at the level I'm coaching and the organizations I'm in, they expect me to come in with a plan, right? They're not there for consensus building and for, we do some exploration because it is coaching, right? But they also expect me to have a certain level of expertise where I'm guiding them step by step in how to develop their brand, how to develop their presence, how to get promoted, or whatever it is they're working on. So they expect me to have that result and drive them through. And when I'm dealing with, VP to C-level executives, and up until about 3 years ago, I was dealing mostly with men in tech roles. So I'm dealing with no diversity. I'm a woman of color, coaching and training, mostly white men. and was well respected, had no problems, right? Because I came in with a certain confidence and a know-how and able to guide to a certain result, right? So my bossiness actually is one of my superpowers. Now, in my personal life, it is, I cannot pull that card too much because it becomes kryptonite, right? But in my work life, that thing that is an imperfection is actually my superpower. And I bet you anyone here who's thinking right now about a superpower about the imperfection that they had, whether it's you talk too much,
That was mine. I talk too much, and now
yeah,
what I do for a living. That's what I.
now you
That's
talk
me
for,
too.
yeah, you're an interviewer, right? You see it time and time again that imperfection is actually, and when you deploy it appropriately, it's a superpower. And so that's the quick down and dirty way I help my clients really quickly extract at least one superpower that they already have. And then there's other ways, of course. So hopefully that's helpful to people.
Thank you, Rasheryl. That's great. And please feel free, everybody, share in the chat, what your superpower is or what you're going to work on trying to develop. It's really great to see, that some of us are not alone in being chatty Cathy's and making that part of our jobs. All right, so to make sure we get kind of more through the questions that people really want to know about, one of the things that has been asked is how about, like, as we talk about social media, is how can you stand out on that, in that server or in that area? Is it just through content creation, or are there other ways to kind of, improve your presence in something that can be very overwhelming, right?
I'll just give a short answer, and I'm sure Rasheryl has lots more to add to this. I think people love stories. There's so much that you can post about what you do or what you offer and all of that, and that's good. I think the more that people have insight into who they're actually working with, who are you as a person, I think that's what stands out, because they're going to learn a lot. They need to know just enough to know, is this somebody I want to reach out to, or that I'd like to consider for employment, or that I'd like to partner or work with. And people work with people. And so the more they understand and know about you, yes, they want to know your bio and your background and all of that. And from a professional, make sure you have the credentials. But at the same time, they want to know who you are as a person. So the more vulnerable you can be and open and share things that are important to you, things that you have focused on, things that have been important in your life, then I think that helps.
Yeah, so I have a couple quick tips. I totally agree with what Rita is saying. And I also think that there's a few things to think about. One is get on only one or two social media platforms and leverage those. So figure out, is it LinkedIn for you? Is it Facebook? Is it IG? What is it, right? And really come up with a plan and leverage those versus trying to be on all channels, right? So that's one thing I would really distill down to, what do I need right now based on my career goals or business goals? The other thing I would say is, you also on your whatever channel you're on, yes, you want people to know who you are. So for instance, on LinkedIn, if you have a complete LinkedIn profile, they're going to see basically your resume and what you've done. They're going to see recommendations. Get all that stuff maximized. But what they most want to see, if someone comes to your website or any of your social media, they want to know how you're going to help them. That is the number one thing they want to know, is do you know what my problem is, and can you solve my problem? And that has to be front loaded because your brand is made, your business is made, your career is made by your ability to solve problems. And so people need to see that right up front, that you get their problem, you can solve it, and then they'll go more into who you are, or they'll see that displayed on your page. So you want to make sure you do both, and I think.
No, that's a great point. And also, maybe I love the point you made, Rasheryl, about limiting it to, one or two channels, because it can be very overwhelming. Yes. Very overwhelming. I know I'm not as active as I would like to be for that very reason. But also, if you know your audience, you know who you're targeting, you know who you would like to see your postings, choose that site. If it's professional, business, mainly LinkedIn probably is the source. There are people who love Twitter. It just depends on who your audience is and where do they hang out. And that's where you want to be, because that's who you want to be seen by. So.
Yeah, it's so great. Thank you for those tips from each of you ladies. That's amazing. We only have 2 minutes left, and I want to make sure that we let people know how they can connect with you. Rasheryl, I know that you had just shared the LeadHERship Presence website where you operate. Are there any other places where people can connect with you? And Rita, same question to you once Rasheryl's done.
Absolutely. So LeadHERshipPresence.com. I just put it in the chat, and you can find me on LinkedIn, and you can find LeadHERship Presence for professional women on Facebook. So just find me somewhere and we will get connected.
Yes, I'm looking to reaching out to you as well. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, pretty much same here. UpToSomething.com is the website. And when you get there, you'll notice it primarily focuses on my podcast. I have a podcast called Life Disrupted, and also on LinkedIn as well. Those are the two main ones, even though I do have Facebook and some others, but I'm not as active. So.
Awesome. Thank you both so much. This has been a wonderful panel. It always goes way too quickly, but I'm really glad that we got to spend time with you this afternoon.